You have a handicap permit?
So what?
Do you have a handicap permit?
Nah.
Is there a reason you parked in a handicap spot?
Nah, I wasn't paying attention. I ain't gonna lie.
How many guns we got in the car?
I believe 2.
Okay. Don't reach for anything. Where's the other one at?
No, I'm not. Well, it's under my seat.
You have a permit?
Yes, sir.
Okay, step out for me. Looks like he does have a valid handgun permit.
That's
But
good.
He is suspended prior with 10 points on his license.
Ooh.
So there's a pistol under the front seat. Like you said, he is a valid permit holder, so we're just going to run it and make sure it's not stolen. And it looks like there's a AK right here. Hey man, we want the AK. I thought there was only 2.
I thought I took it out my car.
He has more guns.
It's a 5.56 AR.
Claims it's a pistol. It's clearly a rifle. We just took the bus out. During the inventory, we found his handgun, which is loaded, the AR, an additional Draco AK-762. He's got a ride coming to take possession of his legally possessed handguns. Unload all your weapons, all the extra rounds out in the chambers, back in the magazines. They're in the trunk. Leave them there. So you guys leave the scene, and you're welcome to stop somewhere, reload your handgun, or whatever you want to do.
Everybody, as many of you guys know, I'm a law enforcement trainer and instructor. I train and instruct law enforcement and military alike on various law enforcement disciplines to include constitutional law, case law, patrol tactics, investigations, etc. And so here we have another gun video, another weapon manipulation considerations for law enforcement officers. This one's going to be a little different than the Florida man one that we did, where a Florida man was open carrying a rifle as he's legally allowed to do by Florida statute and was stopped and detained. So in this clip, you can clearly see that there is an African-American male, black male, has numerous firearms in the vehicle that he's lawfully allowed to have because he is a permit holder. However, his license is suspended, and so therefore it looks like the officer is going to be taking custody of the vehicle, i.e. it looks like it's going to be a tow, and so he is allowing him to take his firearms, but he's going to have the firearms transferred from one car to another. So basically, hey, your buddy's going to take your car, take your guns, put them in his car, but the police officers, there's a lot to go here, but we're just going to talk about the weapon manipulation considerations. Law enforcement officers decide, hey, you know what? I'm going to safe and clear all these weapons, take all the ammunition, load his magazines for him, which, hey, good on you, man. That's, whatever. Load his magazines and then place them in the trunk of the car. And then what I find to be really interesting is, hey, we're going to go ahead and we're going to leave here and you can go wherever you need to go and you can load everything back up again. And so the real question that we have to ask ourselves is, are you like it says here in contention 6, are you making more work for yourself? So we're going to talk about all these in totality, but again, and I'm not here to tell law enforcement how to do their job. Obviously you have the discretion. You do it any way you want. I can just tell you what I teach and the why, right? So here at Solution-Based Law Enforcement Services, we do lots of training, and we talk about the case law and we talk about the why, because if you're going to do something, the why should matter. And at the end of the day, you are going to be judged as a law enforcement officer on the reasonability of why you did what you did. So you're going to be judged on how reasonable it was for you to do what you do. So you have to be able to articulate the reasonability behind everything. And that's what makes our training programs unique. That's what I think makes my training unique. The training that we do here is because of utmost importance is the constitutional law, the case law, and the reasonability of what you do, because your journey does not end with that encounter. And I think a lot of law enforcement officers, they miss this. They really think that once the encounter's over, the journey's over. No, the journey keeps going until adjudication or the statute of limitations is up. Realistically. So at any time you can get deposed, called on the stand and said, why did you do this? Why was this reasonable? And if you can't articulate why it's reasonable, well, then you can expect to have consequences for that. I don't see why this is confusing. I don't see why this is even controversial. So again, when we're talking about weapon manipulations consideration for law enforcement, one, what are the safety benefits? What are the safety benefits at night? Because again, we look at the totality of circumstances pursuant to in accordance with Illinois v. Gates. What is the totality of circumstances? What makes it reasonable? What benefits are you getting from taking all these firearms that aren't yours? You have no idea what modifications be made. You didn't ask about modifications, whether that be trigger guard, grips, slide action assemblies, what have you. You have no idea. And now we're manipulating these things in the dark, and we are trying to quote unquote safe them, take them from one vehicle to another. Again, I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm not saying that there aren't situations in which that would be the most reasonable. But again, these are things to think about. What are the safety benefits am I getting by taking a Draco that's not mine, that I have no idea, or a Glock or AR or AK or whatever, and manipulating them roadside in the dark? Okay, what are the benefits you're getting versus taking the firearm and simply putting it in the trunk of the vehicle? right? So those are considerations. Again, I don't know all the totalities here, but again, these are just things to think about. Number 2, the owner's attitude and behavior. We're going to swing back to this one, but that's also a consideration. Is he being elevated? Is he cool? And this one, the guy seemed cool. He seemed totally chill, whatever, live to let live kind of attitude, which is good. But then again, you don't be surprised if you're taking somebody's firearm who has a lawful authority to have that firearm, in which you're going to give back. Like we saw with Florida Man, he's a little upset because he's like, you're taking my firearm that I'm lawfully able to have, and you're taking it apart just to give it right back to me. Yeah, I can see why, regardless of how you or I feel about it, regardless of how law enforcement feels, regardless of how the citizen feels, there are going to be feelings, right? And those feelings are going to direct behavior and direct the encounter as a whole. I mean, there's just I don't see how you argue against that point. 3, are you familiar with the firearm? Like, how familiar are you with a firearm, with a Draco, or in this case, is it an AR pistol, or is it just a rifle with the buttstock removed? So if you don't realize that statutorily and pursuant to the actual codified rules of the ATF, that is in fact an AR pistol, and it's not an SBR, and it's not a rifle, well, then maybe that shows your inability to actually understand, or you don't have the gun knowledge that you actually think that you have, right? Again, I'm not saying anybody's in the wrong. I'm just telling you, how familiar are you with these firearms that you're about to play with and manipulate? 4, how are you going to give the weapon back, right? Are you going to give, like in this case, you're just going to put it in his trunk, shut the trunk, and be like, all right, dude, like, there you go, it's back. Are you going to hand it back to the person? These are all considerations. And then you have to think, number 5, how will the gun owner put it back on? Is he simply going to be like, okay, you put it in my trunk? Okay, is he going to immediately pop his trunk and start playing with his guns? Is he going to start doing all that there? Can you stop him? As a police officer, if you've told him, hey, the guns are in your trunk, I want you to go, like in this video, I want you to go somewhere else and load them up. Does he have to do that? Is that a lawful order? Can you give somebody a lawful order and tell them where they can participate in their rights to bear arms? I mean, honest question, law enforcement. It's an honest question to you. You can ask them, and you can, ask for their cooperation, and you can ask for them to be cooperative with with your request. But if he says, no, I have a permit, I have a permit, you ran my permit, you ran my firearms, I'm putting this Glock on right now, whether you like it or not. Are you going to give him a lawful order that he can't? And if you are, what are the receipts for that? Right? What's the why? What's the reasonability behind it? And what's your ability to lawfully tell him where he can exercise his freedom to bear arms, his right to bear arms? Again, honest question for law enforcement. If you have an answer, please leave it in the comment section below. I'm dying to hear it. And number 7, is there a holster, right? And this is actually big. Obviously, in this video clip, it's too small. I have no idea what guns were in holsters or what weren't or anything like that, so I'm not going to pretend to know. But again, the fact that there's a holster present or not could be an indication of, maybe it would be more beneficial to safe and secure that weapon, right? If you have a bunch of Glocks or a bunch of rifles and they're, have magazines loaded with one in the chamber, and you're, and especially with Glocks with no safety except for trigger safety, if you're just going to put a bunch of loaded Glocks in with no holster in the back of a moving, trunk of a car, yeah, maybe it is based upon a risk analysis. Maybe it is in the best interest of everybody to take the magazine out and safe that pistol. Okay, in that case, that you're making a very reasonable argument. But if your idea is it's in a holster, now we're going to take the weapon out of the holster, we're going to manipulate the firearm, and then we're going to put it back in the holster with everything separated, put it in the trunk, only for you to then, because that's what happened in this video clip, give advice to go somewhere else and load everything up. Again, how reasonable is that? Are you adding more work for yourself? Are you adding more risks, right? So let's talk about number 6. Are you making more work for yourself? We're going to go straight to the source on this one. And I think this is a great case law to look at. We're going to look directly at United States v. Robinson, number 14, TAC 4902. We're going to read it directly as it is in the case law precedent. On the afternoon in 2014, the Ranson, West Virginia Police Department received an anonymous tip that a black man had loaded a gun in a 7-Eleven parking lot and then concealed it in his pocket before leaving in a car. A few minutes later, the police stopped a car matching the description they had been given, citing the traffic violation. Shaquille Montel Robinson, a black man, was the passenger in the car. After Robinson exited the vehicle at police request, an officer frisked Robinson, discovered a firearm in the pocket of Robinson's pants. Now, obviously, there was some back and forth, but ultimately the circuit court decided, hey, that was a reasonable frisk. We've talked about the constitutionality of different frisks, whether it's Terry v. Ohio, whether it's Michigan v. Long, we're talking about frisking a motor vehicle, etc. So we've talked about that. We've talked about Illinois v. Gates and totality of circumstances. So we've talked, especially as regards to anonymous tips. So we've talked about all of that previous, but the reason why this case law is important for this case is because what was the call for service? The call for service was somebody was in a 7-Eleven parking lot loading a firearm. And now, as a police officer, you've just taken this gentleman's firearms that he's legally allowed to have. You have then now safed them, unloaded all of them, and then now you're telling him to go somewhere else and to load them back up, and it's okay. You can't make that promise. I'm just trying to say we have case law that shows that people doing this can get called in, right? So this idea that you're just going to tell them to go, I mean, it's very likely, and I don't know where this gentleman went, but how likely is it that this gentleman's now going to go to a 7-Eleven, load everything up, and do exactly what the case law and this is talking about? Now the difference is, this Robinson gentleman was a felon, convicted felon, so he couldn't have a firearm. But what happens if he goes and 15 minutes later he's at a Love's gas station or 7-Eleven parking lot and he's loading up a Draco, an AK-47, an AR pistol, a Glock, and he's just trunk up, loading everything up because you literally told him to. It's okay, go ahead, do it. He gets called in. The people that were at that last call aren't on this call. Maybe you're off shift or what have you, and now law enforcement's responding and you have an incident where somebody is shot and killed based upon the advice he was given by a police officer to go ahead and go somewhere else and load things up, right? Are you creating more work for yourself? And how's that going to look later when it comes out, the totality of circumstances, and his buddy's like, whoa, man, like you killed my homeboy. Officer told us to do this. Go look at his body cam footage, right? And then they go back and they're like, okay, so officer, why did you? And now you have to articulate again everything that you did for all the things that you did and why, right? You have to do that. You know what I wouldn't have to do if I did a traffic stop and, hey, you have a firearm? Yeah, I have a concealed carry permit. Okay, cool. You don't touch yours. I don't touch mine. Ha, ha, ha. Here you go. Traffic stop's conducted. Boom. If that gentleman goes on later and does something, or there's a negligent discharge or this or that, you can't in any way point that was me. I didn't take the firearm from him. I did not manipulate that firearm. I did not touch that firearm. I did not tell that individual to go to a gas station or go somewhere else and reload that firearm. I am not going to make more work for myself if I don't have to. And so, again, we can't even say this is hyperbole at this point because we have case law precedences that says that anonymous callers and, anonymous and unknown and people that will tell you who they are, right? So you have reporting parties that, wish to tell you exactly who they are going to call the police for black men, brown men, white men, any kind of men, women, it doesn't matter. If you go to a gas station and you just open your trunk and start loading up firearms, yeah, people are probably going to call the police on you. And so again, it comes back to the reasonability. How reasonable is it that we're doing what we're doing? Especially we have somebody who is a lawful permit carry holder, somebody who can lawfully have firearms, right? Are we making more work for ourselves because we are trying to unload and, secure and unload everything? Again, I'm not saying there aren't times in which that would be prudent. If I run into a video that shows that, I would love to do a video on it and talking about that. But again, it seems like law enforcement are routinely making their jobs more difficult and doing things that they can't themselves describe as being reasonable, right? Because at the end of the day, if that gentleman goes to a gas station, starts loading up his firearms and has a negligent discharge, or somebody calls the police on him, and again, officers respond, and there's a shooting simply because he's loading up firearms he's legally allowed to have based upon and behest upon the guidance and advice of a police officer. Again, it's not a good look. So again, let's go over the 7 real quick. Number 1, what are the safety benefits? 2, what's the owner's attitude and behavior? 3, how familiar are you with the firearm? 4, how will you give the weapon back? 5, how will the owner put that weapon back on? 6, are you making more work for yourself? And 7, is there a holster? So these are all things to consider. Hope this video was helpful for you guys. And as always, long live the Republic.